another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the May 12th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Thank you for joining us today. The highlights under Business and Finance are: a job-hopping lawyer charged with securities fraud accessed files and recruited lawyers at elite firms to tip traders about pending deals, prosecutors said. Microsoft chief executive Satya Nadella took the courtroom stand to testify about OpenAI's temporary ouster of Sam Altman in a case pitting the tech giant and the startup against Elon Musk. Major U.S. stock indexes rose, with the S&P 500 and NASDAQ setting records, with the advances of 0.2% and 0.1%, respectively, while the Dow Industrials gained 0.2%. Cerebras said it would offer 30 million shares in its planned IPO at a price of $150 to $160 a share, up from an initial target of 28 million shares at $115 to $125 a share. Apollo struck deals for two live event businesses, Emerald and Questec, aiming to create a platform for in-person gatherings. KKR's largest private credit fund, held by individual investors, took a $560 million loss in the first quarter when more defaults appeared in it. Shares of Vodacom rose after the telecommunications company raised its final dividend for fiscal 2026 and reported higher earnings. Dreamfinders Homes made public a bid to acquire Beazer Homes for about $704 million, appealing directly to shareholders. Sony agreed to acquire the full catalog of Recognition Music, a collection of more than 45,000 songs by artists ranging from Rihanna to Fleetwood Mac. Now for the key articles under the Worldwide section. The U.S. and Iran are locked in a diplomatic stalemate over issues that have bedeviled the two sides for years, as the conflict between them settles into a zone that is neither war nor peace. Trump said he supports suspending the federal gasoline tax in response to a surge in fuel prices driven by the war. Trump privately complained to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche about media leaks in the wake of the Iran war, spurring Justice Department probes. U.S. attorneys said they repatriated 18 American passengers from the cruise ship struck by the hantavirus outbreak, transporting them to a quarantine center. ABC is a victim of a campaign of censorship and control by the Trump administration, FCC Commissioner Ana Gomez told Disney. The Trump administration said it would delay a plan to address high beef prices that would have suspended tariffs on imported beef. The new battleship, named after Trump, will be nuclear powered, the Navy said, a move expected to increase the cost and complexity of the project. Ukraine's anti-corruption authorities said a former top advisor to President Zelensky is a suspect in a sprawling kickbacks investigation. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is moving his Labour Party to the left in an attempt to save his premiership, announcing the nationalization of British Steel. The man accused of storming the White House Correspondents' Association dinner pleaded not guilty to charges in connection with the attack last month. The Philippines House of Representatives voted to impeach Vice President Sara Duterte over alleged unexplained wealth and threats against the president. The picture on today's front page shows a rather stern businessman being ushered into a meeting. And that caption reads, Tech Showdown. Microsoft's Satya Nadella arrived Monday at federal court in Oakland, California to take the witness stand in Elon Musk's lawsuit against OpenAI. Nadella testified about the AI company's temporary firing of Sam Altman in 2023. There's another picture of Nadella, and that caption reads, I just wanted to make sure we could hang on to the band behind the technology. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella told jurors he was never explicitly given a reason for why Sam Altman was ousted. The article, Nadella testifies on Altman's ousting at OpenAI. By Angel All-You. Microsoft Chief Executive Satya Nadella took the stand in a landmark trial, testifying at length about OpenAI's temporary ouster of Sam Altman in a case pitting the tech giant and the startup against billionaire Elon Musk. After Altman was briefly pushed out of OpenAI by its board members in November 2023, Nadella said he pledged his support to potential new leaders, but also wanted to ensure that Altman and others didn't create a competing company or join Google. That was obviously very concerning to me, said Nadella. Given all of that competition, I just wanted to make sure we could hang on to the band that created all this technology. Musk's team has sought to paint Microsoft as a powerful company exerting control over OpenAI's fate due to its billions of dollars of investments in the startup. Musk attorney Steve Mollo pointed to a news release that OpenAI's board published shortly after Altman's firing, in which they said he hadn't been consistently candid in his communications with the board, hindering its ability to exercise its responsibilities. Pretty definitive statement as to why they fired him, right? Said Mollo. Yeah, said Nadella. Ilya Sutskever, an OpenAI co-founder, also gave brief testimony Monday about the role he played in Altman's firing and disclosed the value of his OpenAI stake is worth roughly $7 billion. Musk is suing OpenAI and its leaders, Altman and Greg Brockman, for allegedly manipulating him into giving tens of millions of dollars to a nonprofit organization only for them to turn the AI lab into a for profit venture. Musk is also suing Microsoft, OpenAI's largest investor, for aiding Altman and Brockman in their alleged deception. Remedies that Musk is asking the court to grant include removing Altman and Brockman from their leadership roles and as much as $180 billion in damages to be transferred from the company's for-profit company to its non-profit parent. OpenAI has said that Musk not only knew about the for-profit conversion plan, but that he also supported it and asked for unilateral control. OpenAI leadership refused to give him a majority stake. Soon after, in 2019, OpenAI secured a large investment from Microsoft. In total, Microsoft has committed $13 billion into OpenAI. During Nadella's testimony, he made clear to jurors that Musk never reached out to him to express concerns when Microsoft made its initial investment in 2019 to OpenAI, or when Microsoft announced its exclusive license for GPT-3 in 2020. Musk also didn't reach out to Nadella when Microsoft committed an additional $10 billion in investment in January 2023, he testified. Does Mr. Musk know how to contact you? Asked a Microsoft attorney. We have each other's phone numbers, said Nadella, glancing at the jury. Suskever, a prominent AI scientist, has a complicated history with OpenAI. He recounted how, in 2023, he told OpenAI's then board that Altman's dishonesty had created an environment at OpenAI that was not conducive to creating safe artificial general intelligence. You told the board that Altman exhibits a consistent pattern of lying, undermining his execs, and pitting his execs against one another, right? Asked Molo. Yes, said Suskever. Suskever worked at Google until the end of 2015 to help start OpenAI. During his testimony, he shared that the search giant had offered him $6 million a year to stay. He left OpenAI in May 2024 to start his own AI company. U.S. Iran locked in gray zone between war, peace. Ceasefire is on life support, Trump says, but neither side looks eager to fight for now. By Lawrence Norman and Robbie Gramer. The U.S. and Iran are locked in a diplomatic stalemate over issues that have bedeviled the two sides for years, as the conflict settles into a gray zone that is neither war nor peace. The ceasefire is entering its second month, and despite sporadic violence, has lasted almost as long as the fighting that preceded it. There is little to indicate that the U.S. or Iran is ready to compromise, but neither wants to resume fighting. President Trump warned on Monday that the ceasefire with Iran is on massive life support after he rejected Iran's response to a proposal for ending the war, calling it a piece of garbage. He said he wouldn't back off his goal of pressing Iran to abandon its nuclear program. Trump said Iran believed he would get tired or bored of the conflict or feel pressure to end it because of rising energy prices. But there's no pressure, Trump said. We're going to have a complete victory. Iran, in the meanwhile, continues to portray itself as the winner of the conflict, its regime intact, its missile and nuclear programs still a threat. A top Iranian official on Monday warned the U.S. against escalation. Our armed forces are ready to deliver a well-deserved response to any aggression, Mohammad Badr Ghalibaf said in a post on X. But instead of fighting, both sides have doubled down on dueling blockades that are hard to undo without one side blinking. The Trump administration has tightened a U.S. embargo of Iranian ports and vessels, while Iran has maintained its grip on the Strait of Hormuz, a vital energy transport waterway. We're in a situation where the only options left are a lot of bad options, said Alison Miner, a former U.S. official on Middle East policy, now at the Atlantic Council think tank. If the administration wants the standoff ended swiftly, the U.S. could face pressure to water down key goals. The Trump administration is going to be forced to choose, she said. A spokesperson for the White House referred to Trump's Monday's comments. A week ago, there was a flurry of optimism around diplomacy, with U.S. officials and others involved in negotiations saying the two sides were drawing closer to a framework deal that could shape a durable peace. That optimism has faded somewhat. For now, there remain significant gaps in the U.S. and Iranian positions over the future management of the strait and the kind of constraints Tehran will accept on its future nuclear work and infrastructure, people close to the talks said. While fissures have appeared within the Iranian regime over the extent of domestic economic damage the war might inflict, Iran's latest proposal demonstrates its confidence that Trump's threats to escalate are empty, and Tehran's patience for a protracted standoff is longer than the White House's. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. An insider trading scandal rocks elite M&A law firms. Job-hopping lawyer accessed files to tip off pending deals, prosecutors say, by Dave Michaels. Someone kept making winning trades just before big acquisitions that were being handled by the same Boston law firm. Authorities initially thought it was another case of foreign hackers stealing valuable information from a U.S. law firm. But hackers weren't swiping secrets. Investigators discovered it was an inside job. After closely analyzing the deals and other information, FBI agents traced the well-timed tips back to a single lawyer, Nicolo Norif-Chan, who worked at the Boston-based firm Goodwin Procter. Norif-Chan had a lucrative side hustle, providing traders around the world with illicit tips about coming buyouts over a decade, federal prosecutors said. He also recruited M&A lawyers at other elite firms, Wachtell Lipton and Weil Gotshal, to dish on their deals, prosecutors said. The case marks one of the most brazen insider trading schemes in years, ensnaring several of Wall Street's biggest M&A advisory firms and multi-billion-dollar deals that they worked on for clients including Amazon.com, Johnson & Johnson, and Burger King. The participants celebrated their windfalls, ranging from $2,000 to $3 million by exchanging means of making it rain dollar bills, the court filings show. Norav Chan, 43 years old, was arrested last week and charged with securities fraud. The case involves 29 other defendants, including his brother and college friends. Prosecutors said the Yale Law School graduate provided tips about more than a dozen undisclosed mergers and acquisitions. Jobs at OpenAI turned into huge jackpots for employees by Berber Jin. OpenAI allowed employees to sell up to $30 million worth of shares each in a recent financing, making them some of the earliest financial winners of the artificial intelligence boom. Last October, more than 600 current and former employees sold their shares in a single stroke, collectively making $6.6 billion. For about 75 of them, that meant walking away with the full $30 million, according to people familiar with the matter. Some of them chose to give away the rest, putting the remaining shares in donor-advised funds, charitable investment accounts that commit money for philanthropic causes, while also allowing donors to claim tax deductions for that year. The sale offers a sneak peek into the flood of money that will soon hit San Francisco and other tech capitals. OpenAI and Anthropic are gearing up for what will likely be some of the largest IPOs in history, allowing their thousands of rank-and-file workers to unload their stock, turning many of them into multi-millionaires. Home sales extend slump. Home sales were flat in April, rising 0.2% over the previous month to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 4.02 million. That slight gain marked a reversal from March, when home sales dropped a revised 2.9%. But April numbers were below expectations of a 3% increase. Leaving the front page for other articles within the paper. Trump backs pause on gasoline tax by Natalie Andrews. Washington. President Trump said he supports suspending the federal gasoline tax, responding to a surge in fuel prices driven by the war in Iran. "I'm going to," he told reporters in the Oval Office on Monday, arguing that gas prices will drop like a rock once the war winds down. Asked how long the tax should be suspended, Trump said, "until it's appropriate," adding that the tax is a relatively small proportion of the cost of gasoline, but it's still money. The price of gasoline has steadily increased since the U.S. and Israel launched the war at the end of February. The average nationwide cost of 1 gallon of regular unleaded gasoline is roughly $4.50, according to AAA. 1 year ago, it was $3.14. Any effort to suspend the gas tax would require congressional approval. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, said Monday on social media that he would introduce a bill to suspend the 18 cents per gallon tax. Democrats have endorsed similar legislation. Zelensky ex-aide targeted in probe by Anastasia Malenko, Kyiv, Ukraine. Anti-corruption authorities said a former top presidential advisor is a suspect in a sprawling investigation, a blow to Ukraine's leadership in the midst of the war with Russia. The announcement late Monday by Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau, or NABU, is a stunning twist in a long-running case dubbed Operation Midas that already has implicated close allies of President Volodymyr Zelensky. NABU released an 18-minute video Monday along with a statement saying it had served a notice of suspicion to the former head of the presidential office. The agency didn't identify the person directly, but blurred photographs in the video appeared to depict Andriy Yermak, who served as Zelensky's top aide for 5 years and his chief link with the U.S. government. Yermak declined to comment to a reporter in a video posted by Ukrainian news site Ukrainska Pravda on Monday, citing the continuing investigation. Starmer tacks more to the left to try to quell UK party revolt, by Max Colchester, London. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is moving his Labour Party to the left in an attempt to save his premiership, announcing Monday the nationalisation of British Steel, one of the UK's last steel makers and closer ties to Europe. Starmer, whose Labour Party slumped to a historic loss in local elections last week, on Monday ditched his trademark pragmatic style, making an impassioned and for more populist speech to his party in a bid to stave off a brewing rebellion from his own lawmakers. Swapping his traditional coat and tie for rolled-up shirt sleeves, Starmer promised a more activist government where stories beat spreadsheets and said incremental change won't cut it. There was little mention of how to get Britain's weak economy growing more quickly. The speech was aimed at heading off a challenge from more leftist members of his party who have become increasingly restive on Starmer's popularity struggles to rise above 20%. The party's dismal showing in local elections last week sparked a flurry of plotting in Westminster. At least 50 lawmakers from his party, about 1/10 of the total, have called for him to go. On Monday, 2 junior ministerial aides quit the government and said Starmer should leave. Starmer, 63 years old, has vowed to march on, saying the UK paid the price for having cycled through 5 prime ministers in the past 7 years, and that now is a dangerous time for a leadership change, with a geopolitical crisis from the Iran war. Analysts said his government has little flexibility after it ran a budget shortfall of 5.2% of gross domestic product last year. The government must also contend with growing demands on spending needs in years to come, from defense to an aging population. The British government is paying a premium to borrow compared with other Western economies, and any attempt to take on more debt without paying for it via increasing taxes, which are already at a post-war high, might spook markets further. On Monday, UK government borrowing costs rose slightly as Starmer said the government would launch a process to nationalize British Steel, an unprofitable steel maker that is owned by the Chinese group Xingyi. Britain's government took operational control of the British Steel site last year after the Chinese company said it might close the plant's blast furnaces, costing 2,600 jobs because of high cost. Britain's government has since been spending more than £1 million, equivalent to roughly $1.4 million a day, keeping the site going, according to the UK's independent government spending watchdog. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, Iran thinks Trump is bluffing. The regime figures it can outlast the U.S. on the Strait and uranium. Days late and tons of enriched uranium short, Iran's regime rejected the U.S. peace offer on Sunday and replied with unserious demands. On Monday, President Trump called Iran's counter-offer a piece of garbage that leaves the ceasefire on massive life support, where the doctor walks in and says, "Sir, your loved one has approximately a 1% chance of living." Call it a standoff? Before Iran's response, Mr. Trump had said, if they don't agree, the bombing starts. He had also said, we may go back to Project Freedom, the U.S. effort to guide commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz, if things don't happen. This would be Project Freedom plus other things, which may be necessary to protect oil tankers. Iran spent last week trashing the ceasefire, twice attacking U.S. warships with missiles, drones, and speedboats, and repeatedly firing on the United Arab Emirates, a U.S. ally. The U.S. responded only to the sources of the fire with what the president called just a love tap. By clinging to the ceasefire through it all, Mr. Trump sent the wrong signal. Iran's regime clearly thinks it can outlast a president who no longer wants the fight. They think that I'll get tired of this, or I'll get bored, or I'll have some pressure, Mr. Trump recognized in his Monday remarks. But there's no pressure at all. We're going to have a complete victory. The problem is that he is under pressure and everyone knows it. Why else is the president now talking about pausing the gas tax? Mr. Trump is right about the regime's perception of him, but he'll have to prove it wrong. The achievements of the war are real, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu laid out on 60 Minutes on Sunday. Iran's long-range missiles, missile production, Navy, and air defenses have been smashed, along with nuclear scientists and nuclear weaponization sites. The regime is showing fissures and has lost much of its money machine, plus its immunity from direct attack. We broke the barrier of fear, Mr. Netanyahu said. The regime must now take that into account. Yet Mr. Netanyahu didn't mince words about what remains to be done. It's not over, he said. There's still nuclear material, enriched uranium, that has to be taken out of Iran. There are still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. There are ballistic missiles that they still want to produce. Mr. Netanyahu reiterated a plan to draw down to zero U.S. military aid, by the way, noting that he previously ended reliance on U.S. economic aid. Israel has tiny territory, but gigantic talent, he said. shares gems of intelligence and military technology, and everybody's pro-American because we appreciate what America stands for. This is the ally that Democrats and some on the right increasingly want to renounce, naturally. Could a deal address the outstanding issues in Iran? So far, no. The regime's counteroffer rejected any dismantling of nuclear facilities. It demanded major sanctions relief before making nuclear commitments and sought to hang on to much of its enriched uranium and shorten a moratorium on further enrichment. This is a regime that thinks it can absorb economic pain from the U.S. blockade longer than Mr. Trump can tolerate higher prices for oil and petrochemicals. Mr. Trump will have to persuade Tehran's leaders they've underestimated him and the pain. From the opinion pages, Donald Trump's Nixon moment. Can the president persuade Xi to free Jimmy Lai from a Chinese prison? 100% I'll get him out. He'll be easy to get out. Thus spoke Donald Trump on October 2024, 2 weeks before the election that returned him to the White House. Radio host Hugh Hewitt had asked if he would urge Chinese leader Xi Jinping to free Jimmy Lai, a Hong Kong press baron who is arguably the Chinese Communist Party's most hated man, from his prison cell in Hong Kong. Now, as President Trump travels to China for his summit with Mr. Xi, the pressure is on. Whether he succeeds or fails to gain Jimmy's freedom will tell the world whether he is a brilliant negotiator or just another politician who makes promises he cannot keep. The good news is that Mr. Trump hasn't forgotten his pledge. As he was boarding Air Force One in the fall of 2025, a reporter from the Eternal Word television network asked if he would speak to Mr. Xi about releasing Jimmy. It's on my list. I'm going to ask, Mr. Trump said. About that time, Pope Leo XIV also spoke to Mr. Lai's wife, Teresa, and their daughter after a general audience in Rome. Mr. Trump had also held a private meeting with Jimmy's son, Sebastian, and has publicly repeated several times, most recently on Monday in the Oval Office, that America wants this man freed. This is encouraging news, not only for Jimmy's wife and children, but for close family friends, myself included, and all those who see in Mr. Lai's fate a mirror of Hong Kong's future. The heavy security presence Hong Kong insisted on during Jimmy's trial, the government acted as if he were Osama bin Laden rather than an ailing septuagenarian, show how much the authorities fear his message. This makes it all the more challenging for China to let him go. But there's precedent. In the immediate aftermath of the brutal 1989 crackdown on students who had protested in Tiananmen Square, dissident astrophysicist Feng Izzi sought refuge in the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. The Chinese, who had put Feng atop their most wanted list of Tiananmen Square protesters, demanded him back, which America refused. Diplomatic efforts slowed to a halt. There would be practically no movement while Feng remained stuck inside the embassy. So it was until April 1990 when former President Richard Nixon wrote a letter to Deng Xiaoping, making the case that it was time to seize the moment and make a big play. Nixon acknowledged that China would come in for a flurry of criticism at first, but so long as Feng remained in Beijing, Nixon argued he would be an impediment to Chinese objectives. Feng was released 2 months after Nixon's letter. Today, we are at a similar impasse. Jimmy's release isn't only a question of Mr. Trump's negotiation skills. It's also a question of whether Mr. Xi has the wit to appreciate what Mr. Trump is offering, a way to solve China's Jimmy Lai problem once and for all. Mr. Trump has a huge stake in how it plays out. During Jimmy's trial, the Hong Kong government made preposterous claims, arguing that as a journalist, Jimmy promoted subversive values. These were the same values that had transformed Hong Kong from a barren rock into a prosperous metropolis. Anglo-American values, in short, rooted in freedom and the rule of law. Jimmy's crime was trying to preserve what makes Hong Kong tick and distinct from China. Putting Jimmy in prison only enhanced his reputation around the world. This month, more than 100 members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike, signed a letter urging Mr. Trump to press Mr. Xi to let Jimmy go. That isn't easy for Mr. Xi to do, but it's wiser than the alternative, which is to let Mr. Lai become a stumbling block to China's global ambitions. Freeing Mr. Lai would not only get him off Beijing's hands, it's a helpful concession to make when Mr. Trump is pressing Beijing over its imports from Iran. For Mr. Trump, the stakes are likewise high. Everyone knows the president has said that freeing Jimmy would be easy. If the president fails to make it happen, Jimmy and his family will pay the highest price. But Mr. Trump will pay a high price too. Many of those Democrats who signed the letter calling for Jimmy's release will mock him for failing to make good on a promise he called easy. If, on the other hand, Mr. Trump leaves Beijing with Mr. Lai's freedom secured, he will take a huge victory lap, and he will have earned it. That article was by William McGurn, who is Jimmy Lai's godfather when he converted to Catholicism in 1997. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. A decade after Brexit, British politics is coming apart. The rise of populism and increasingly radical leftism could be a foretaste of the American political future. By Gerard Baker. Brexit was a shot heard round the world a decade ago next month, when the British voted to reject the recommendation of their political, economic, and cultural establishment and leave the European Union. Its global significance was its loud expression of deep disaffection with the self-satisfied, self-serving elites in Western democracies who dictated the boundaries of acceptable debate on immigration, national sovereignty, the globalized economy, and the modern gospel of cultural progressivism. It echoed with thunderous effect across the Atlantic a few months later when Donald Trump rode similar discontent to the White House. A decade on, the political instability, economic malaise, and social disorder that are the hallmarks of modern Britain have led many, even some of those who discharged the weapon, to conclude that the target of that shot might have been their own foot. But last week's local elections across the country, a kind of national midterm, indicated that the revolutionary spirit is as vibrant as ever, and if anything, intensifying and spreading. The ascendant forces are populist nationalism and a more radical progressivism that has risen to challenge it. Like Brexit, the mood there could presage, indicate similar developments in politics here. The results confirm that Keir Starmer, the Labour Prime Minister elected less than 2 years ago with a landslide in parliamentary seats, but not votes, is about as popular as the Hanta virus patient on a cruise. Labour hit historic lows in the popular vote. Barely 1 in 6 backed the party. Across England, cities and towns that had never known anything but Labour rule fell on one side to Nigel Farage's Reform UK and on the other to a Green Party whose core message is that Labour is insufficiently radical. Wales, Labour's historic redoubt, fell to Plaid Cymru, the Welsh nationalist, with Mr. Farage's Reform UK running second. The Scottish National Party won again, with Labour barely holding on to a distant second place in Scotland. Mr. Farage, Donald Trump's favorite non-royal Brit, advanced almost everywhere and is on course to be Prime Minister after the next general election in 2 or 3 years. Analysts by Focal Data, a polling firm, suggest an election based on last week's results. Not all parts of the country voted. Would see Reform at 28%, the Conservatives, the once dominant right of center party, at 20%, Labour at 18%, the Greens at 17%, and the left-leaning Liberal Democrats at 14%. The results portray an unprecedented political fragmentation. 5 parties competing in England with differing strengths in different regions, plus the nationalist parties in the smaller nations. It results in the curious and unhealthy reality that, thanks to the vagaries of the electoral system, Labour and the Tories combined have 80% of seats in Parliament, but command the support of little more than a third of the British public. The daily back and forth of national politics and government is conducted by politicians widely rejected by voters. Laid bare again in the sulphurous discontent, not only with traditional parties, but with an entire democratic system voters feel is failing them. Support for the center-right and center-left parties has collapsed amid demands for radical alternatives. Mr. Farage's voters and plenty of others are angry with failed efforts to stop illegal immigration, the advance of multiculturalism, and elite deprecation of traditional values, and an economy viewed as opportunityless for the many in an age of rapid technological change. The national conservatism his movement represents has sparked its own backlash, a chic radicalism of the latte-sipping classes with their climate alarmism, demand for a return to the EU, and solidarity with Palestinians who seek to destroy Israel. The surging Greens have made opposition to Israel a core part of their platform. Their leader, Zach Polanski, who is Jewish but passionately anti-Zionist, has called the wars in Gaza and Lebanon genocide. His party was belatedly forced to withdraw candidates with a history of anti-Semitic social media posts. Among the first words out of the mouth of the new Green mayor of Lewisham in southeast London, where the party ousted Labour after 55 years in power, was a call for a borough to seek a twinning arrangement, a sister city designation with a Palestinian town. This polarization is on display elsewhere. If Mr. Starmer is toppled as a result of the labor disaster, which seems increasingly probable, his successor is likely to be from the left of the party, which demands even higher taxes on the rich and more welfare spending. The U.S. has a singular political culture, and not all these trends are replicated here. There is unlikely to be a serious third party, much less a fourth or fifth. But the larger political dynamic is transatlantic and global. Mr. Trump may not be popular in Britain, but Trumpism and its rejection of old liberal democratic orthodoxies is rapidly gaining ground on the right. In Britain, as in the U.S., the response is centrifugal. The left is reaching for the diminishing middle ground, but seeking expanded territory on the more radical extreme. The old politics is dead. The age of populism is only beginning. How imperfect people form a more perfect union. Think of the Declaration of Independence as the nation's report card. How well do we live up to it? By Neil Gorsuch. The Declaration of Independence is a short document, not much longer than this essay. Even so, it contains 3 ideas that shocked the world in 1776. Each of us is born equal. God grant us all inviolable rights, including the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and we, the people, have the right to govern ourselves. Those 3 ideas represent America's creed. When Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration in rooms he rented from a Philadelphia bricklayer, few in Europe believed in them. More than that, many considered them a threat to the existing social and political order. But to the patriots who fought in the long and brutal years of the American Revolution, those 3 ideas were worth the sacrifice of our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. The Declaration's 3 great ideas still speak to us. Really, the Declaration serves as our nation's report card. At any point in history, the American people can assess how well we are living up to the Declaration's promises and what challenges remain. In 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and her colleagues at Seneca Falls, New York, reminded the American people that men and women are created equal. Years later, Abraham Lincoln called on the country to live up to the Declaration's promises in the face of slavery, secession, and a bloody civil war. Martin Luther King Jr., standing before the Lincoln Memorial in 1963, challenged Jim Crow and called on the country to redeem the Declaration's promissory note for all Americans. Our nation will always be a work in progress, but the Declaration stands as a constant reminder of who we aspire to be. Nor should our nation's imperfections blind us to the tremendous inheritance we have received. Even a quick glance through history and around our world today confirms how rare it is for a nation to be founded on the hope of realizing equality, liberty, and self-government for its citizens. As Daniel Webster observed, it took thousands of years of human history for a nation devoted to the Declaration's three great ideas to arise. Miracles like that do not cluster. The legacy of the Declaration, though, owes only a partial debt to the genius of the document and those who wrote it. Its real guardian and its hope for the future lies in the hearts of the American people. Equality, liberty, and self-government became the nation's creed because Americans in generation after generation chose them. And the survival of those ideas depends on each passing generation learning about them anew, engaging with the history that gave rise to them, and choosing them all over again. Yes, we have our differences, but that was true even at our nation's founding. Americans hotly debated whether to part ways with Britain. The first vote on the Declaration of Independence split the colonies. Federalists and anti-Federalists disagreed over whether to ratify the Constitution. Today, Americans disagree strongly about important matters, as they always have and perhaps always will. But that, in many ways, is our nation's greatest strength. By allowing everyone to speak and vote, we seek to harness the ideas of not only one ruler or group of elites, we seek to tap the full wisdom of the American people. In the face of disagreement, we speak and listen, debate and compromise, vote, and then chart our way forward together. All of that is exactly what the Declaration hoped for us, and all of it lies at the core of the great American experiment. The American story is like no other, and this year we celebrate a milestone like no other, the founding of the longest living republic in the world. I look forward to the celebrations, the parades and picnics, the speeches and fireworks, but I also hope that all Americans will spend some time reflecting on the Declaration and recommitting to its creed. I hope, too, that each of us takes this opportunity to learn more about some of the ordinary people who sacrificed so much to make America possible. Those who fought a revolution against the most powerful empire on earth, who began our improbable experiment in self-government, who challenged the nation to live up to the Declaration's promises throughout our history, and who, in every generation, have given their lives for the cause of liberty, equality, and self-government. To them, we owe a debt beyond repayment, and thanks to them, we have the opportunity to continue the work of forming a more perfect union. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 12, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has